I'm supposed to be having top surgery the day this video goes up, but due to some last-minute insurance issues, I don't really know anymore. By the time I do, I should be able to edit in whether or not everything worked out. Either way, I'm probably going to be able to get top surgery this year, so to celebrate that, I wanted to make a video about trans OCs, because unlike the mainstream female-to-male narrative, I didn't always know I wanted to be a boy. While I happen to have a lot of OCs that explore different expressions of transness now, there was one in particular that really helped me discover my identity. That was all this video was going to be about. But because of how varied people's experiences with gender can be, I felt like a lot could be gained by presenting more perspectives than just my own. It's definitely not uncommon for artists to realize things about themselves through their art, and what's interesting is seeing how differently that can occur for each and every individual. I took advantage of the fact that I'm in an art Discord YouTuber server and asked if anyone else wanted to share their stories, and a few people did. So without further ado, here's how 3 different artists explored their gender identity through their OCs.
I figured out I was non-binary through my Pathfinder tabletop character, Warden, who I drew a lot throughout my time playing them. I might have 2, maybe 3 sketchbooks that are mostly Warden. It's fine. So I'm normal. Anyway, being non-binary wasn't even something I figured out all at once. By the way, if you haven't met me, hi, I'm Grim. Now, let's set the stage. I was close friends with all the people at my table, and they were my classmates in my university who were all studying animation or illustration. Save for the DM, who is my partner still to this day, who was working full-time and writing on his own. So, still doing creative things. Everyone there was some flavor of queer, except for me and my partner. We were still pretty early on in our relationship, and at the time both identified as pretty cishet. We were the token straight friends. But of what I remember of the rest of the table, we had a trans man, a questioning bisexual, someone who was polyamorous, and one other player who I never got into the details of their identity with, but definitely wasn't cis. I think I had some unconscious inkling that I wasn't quite straight at the time, or maybe something else entirely, but I didn't really know for sure. I certainly didn't have words for it. And knowing this table was a pretty safe place to experiment and explore, I decided my character, Warden, would strictly use they/them pronouns. It's important to note that I don't think I knew about the term non-binary at the time either. I just knew some people went by they/them. Now, Warden is a paladin. Their oath was to protect the weak, and they viewed weakness as a temporary state anyone could be in. Downtrodden, impaired, anyone who couldn't defend themselves. They were weak, and they deserved Warden's protection. And Warden was hopelessly kind. Now, when I describe that, you're probably picturing a knight who's pretty masculine, because that is what a paladin normally is. A knightly, masculine dude who's here to save the day. Well, as if I couldn't have gotten a bigger hint I was non-binary, on top of my knightly paladin using they/them pronouns, they were a hollow suit of armor. They didn't even have a typical body to even be dysphoric about, or fit within the confines of assigned sex at birth. You can't be assigned suit of armor at birth. I wish I could have been, though. Armor's cool. Anyway, When I made Warden, I didn't set out to make some deliberate exploration of my identity. I just thought it would be a fun way to understand something about others and the world around me. But the more I drew Warden, the more I learned about their backstory, the more I liked them as a character. And regarding their backstory, I did an amnesia plot to let my DM have fun making it up. Eventually, I learned Warden was an elven girl in her previous life, even learned her dead name. And yet, I never ended up connecting that much with that part of Warden's life. As a reflection of that, Warden never sought their old body back, or even took on their old name. They simply remained as Warden, a hollow suit of armor that wanted to do good. I think by the end of the campaign, I came to admire Warden. Not in a way of thinking they were better than others or particularly cleverly written. I admired who they were. I had accidentally made a hero, a role model for myself to look up to. Not only that, but I found myself being more compassionate outside the gaming table, more comfortable blurring the lines of gender. In fact, when I got to college, I had started going by a different preferred name because one of my friends at the table had the same dead name as me. I had started using a preferred name out of convenience, but then I grew to fit it and like it. And like Warden, I didn't want my old name back. Eventually, there was a Trans Day of Visibility event at my university. One of the faculty, who's a trans woman, and some of the students who were trans, held a presentation talking about their experiences and sharing resources. One of the students who spoke was my trans mask friend in our campaign, so I went because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to hear about his experiences. And through the resources that ended up being shared at that event, I ran into the term non-binary. And I realized I wanted to be more like Warden. Just out there doing good and not fitting the mold of any gender binary. I'm still working on getting the full suit of armor, though. That would be nice one day. Anyway, to celebrate, I ended up drawing Warden with a battle standard, patterned as the non-binary flag. My queer friends were generally supportive and more than happy to help me try out pronouns. So, thank you to my artist friends for that little playground of imagination where we smashed our OCs together on adventures. I wouldn't have figured out who I was without you, without the chance to make Warden.
Hello, my name is ELGAT and I'm going to be talking about OCs and gender identity. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about some serious themes, but mostly I want to focus on the happy part, and that's just because, in my opinion, I want to focus on the more trans-positive things, because right now is what I need the most, and I don't want to cry a lot doing this video, so yeah. Early in my childhood, I didn't know I was trans, and I didn't know because I didn't know how gender worked, and I was like, what the hell is a girl? What the hell is a boy? I don't know, I'm just someone in this planet Earth like everyone else. So obviously in my early artwork you couldn't differentiate the genders between characters because I thought we were all just like agender. And it's funny to think now because I'm a trans man and I do engage with gender roles. But I don't know, I just was drawing agender characters and I thought I was agender and I thought everyone was agender. So my OCs didn't have a gender. And this, believe it or not, was something I did until secondary school. So just about puberty. And I was a little boy and I was drawing my OC character that was to represent myself. And I had a boyfriend, air quotes, because, you know, it's not that serious. But he said to me, why doesn't she have boobs? And I was astonished because I was like, what? But not about the content, more about, whoa, right, I'm supposed to be a girl. I'm supposed to be drawing myself as a girl. After that comment, I tried to draw myself as a girl, but it didn't seem fun to me. So the next best thing was OCs. And my OCs were predominantly male, and all the girls were drawn in a tomboyish way. One thing I think is very funny, and I wanted to add, is like, I didn't know what trans meant, but when I was drawing myself, I would draw my negative self, like myself and my demon version or real version of me, like my thoughts. And funnily enough, it was a man. I drew my thoughts as a man and myself as a girl. And I never questioned this, and I feel like it's very funny. Anyway, OCs. My OCs, like everyone else's OCs, were like very powerful beings that could control the world and had the ability to transform into anything. And I didn't stop at boy. I went all the way and I made myself like a butterfly, and all of them were like powerful beings, like gods. And it was very freeing for me because through puberty, I tried to convince myself that it was the right thing, and everyone felt scared as shit and felt disconnected from their bodies. And my only escape was my OCs. So I would draw them and I would feel more like myself when I was drawing the OC than when I was drawing my Sona. And drawing them was like an escape, like I said. I felt connected to them. I felt like I was them. And I related to them a lot. Basically, I tried to recreate the boy puberty experience through them. I created a school with all of these different characters, but I just related to one that was a boy and had a group of friends that just goofed around and had funny stories with them. Remember I said I had like my demon persona that was actually a boy that was me? Well, basically they look the same. The funny thing I think is that I never questioned anything of this. Like, I was exploring gender and I was exploring what it would feel like to actually be perceived as a boy, but I never saw anything wrong with it. Thankfully, my teachers never saw my drawings because I don't think they would be very accepting. But apart from my boyfriend at the time, no one questioned my intense obsession with my OC. In this segment of the video, I want to clarify that I simplified the story of my gender identity because it's very complex, as you can imagine, and a lot of the steps weren't related to my OCs. So I'm just going to be talking about the part of my OCs had an influence on how I viewed my gender or how I viewed gender in general. So when I was little, I made all these stories about a boy growing up, but there was a moment, and I think it overlapped with me learning what was being transgender and me being afraid that that label might apply to me, where I stopped this gender exploring process. And I did still draw lots of boys, more boys than girls, but I think I was afraid of confronting the reality that I wanted to be the boys I was drawing, and I didn't have a Sona because it was too much. I didn't want to think about how I was physically, who I was mentally. I didn't want to think about me. I just wanted to draw cute boys, draw cute girls, and get over it. But I never got over it because it was not a phase. When I finally tried to accept who I was, I started drawing myself again, and I tried to draw myself as a cis-passing boy. And honestly, it wasn't very hard because, like I said, I drew a lot of boys that I wanted to look like, so I knew how to draw myself. And no OC survived that. I fused all my OCs into one, and that was my Sona, because I didn't have to hide it anymore. I didn't have to hide it from myself that I was drawing who I wanted to be. After a few months, I think, of exploring my gender identity and coming to terms with myself and my transness, I started to create original stories again. There was one character that manifested all my insecurities, even though I wasn't conscious at the time that I was doing it, that I was fitting all my fears into this one character, and this character's name was Mike. I was genuinely scared what my parents or my familiars or what my friends would think, so I did what anyone anyone would do in my situation, I joined a Discord where I felt comfortable using my masculine pronouns, and then joined a roleplay group and roleplayed as one of my OCs, Mike. And I think Mike was the OC that made me feel like more like myself and test the waters as how it would feel if I was born as a cis male. And genuinely, I don't think I have ever had as much fun as roleplaying as Mike. And I feel very fond of these memories because every time I would roleplay, I would feel the gender euphoria of being perceived as a man and no one questioning it. I feel like I have to add that Mike was a very morally grey but leaning into the villain archetype, and that was because I still felt like if I was a man I would be bad, and now obviously I don't think that, but in that moment I felt ashamed of myself for letting myself basically free. So I tried to convince myself that if I let myself free I would be bad, but obviously I am not. And Mike is still a character that I use to this day to represent my fears of gender, and I'm actually using him in my new story, ELGAT'S. Sorry for the random promo, but in my new story, the main character, Summer, is a trans girl that makes a deal with Mike in hopes that she would feel more comfortable in her gender, and Mike sells her the fantasy of becoming a girl, but the thing is that it's just a transformation for a period of time, and every time the effects wear down, she returns to her old self. And I'm not explaining this to explain my OC story here, like randomly, but this is generally what Mike was for me. In a point, I was Summer with the opposite gender, but basically the same, where I would roleplay for hours and feel gender euphoric, but then I had to return to reality and confront my old self, my real body, and it would make me feel like crap, basically. So I would spend more hours in Discord, more hours roleplaying, and the thing is that I didn't want to confront my reality, that I was trans and I wasn't cis. And you might be saying, oh God, didn't you say that this is trans positive? Yes, one second. While writing ELGAT'S, it was a love letter to myself and other trans folks. That's why Summer is a trans girl and not trans man. The thing is that some of us, not every trans person, but at least for me, I always felt like I was fighting this uphill battle of not being cis, of every changes I made wasn't enough because I wasn't cis, and the only way to become cis was to roleplay or becoming someone else entirely, becoming one of my OCs. But the thing is, when Summer runs out of power, when I don't roleplay, she's still a woman and I'm still a man. For me, it doesn't matter that we're trans, because maybe my younger self was right. We are all humans performing gender, and what our sex is assigned as when we're born, or how our bodies are, don't actually define what we are. Hopefully, I made myself clear, and I'm not saying that roleplaying as a character or your OC is bad for you. Obviously, it was great for me, and even though I'm not doing it now, I would love to do it someday. Trans rights are human rights, and thank you for having me.
Last story of the day is mine. My name is Azriel, and I'm going to talk about my character, Clarity. I made him on New Year's in 2021 when I started playing Runescape as a joke, but unexpectedly ended up hyperfixating on it. Although I always considered him separate to myself, I approached creating him like I would a self-insert or Sona. His name comes from my old social media handle, he has teal hair because that's my favorite color, and he was a girl because I was a girl. At some point, I found a place where you can freely alter your character's gender. Now, the next steps might seem obvious. I switch him from woman to man, I have an epiphany, boom, transgender. Well, that's basically what happened. We're missing a lot of context. Because I'm unlikely to go over this again, I'll be quite thorough. So here's how I went from not wanting to be around anything associated with masculinity to becoming a man. As a child, I was the most stereotypically girly girl to ever girl. I went to kindergarten in princess dresses, wanted everything I owned to be pink, and loved everything there ever was relating to femininity. I remember vividly that I wanted to be a woman. In contrast to my idolization of femininity, I developed an intense disdain for masculinity. The boys around me were rude and gross, and I was raised to believe that that was a fact of their gender. The idea further solidified itself as I grew up. Boys were not only allowed, but expected to be invasive and inconsiderate towards girls. While I wouldn't stay a girly girl, I always saw myself as more aligned with women and feminine people. I couldn't see anything good in masculinity, so it came as a surprise even to me when I realized I was a trans man. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Growing up, despite gradually leaning more towards androgynous or masculine presentations, I never once considered being anything other than a girl. And it wasn't a matter of not knowing about trans people. I had definitely heard of them by the time I stopped presenting overtly feminine. But it was as news articles I would hear in passing of female-to-male people trying to advocate for gender-affirming healthcare. When you're trying to justify something to a bunch of people who don't or choose not to understand, you cannot leave room for debate. So you get quotes like, "I'm a boy in a girl's body. I always knew I was a boy," and variations of, "I always did stereotypically masculine things and hated girly stuff." Evidently, that wasn't me, which meant that I certainly wasn't trans. My leaning away from femininity was simply a reaction to misogyny. Being a girl means everyone feels entitled to your body and your feelings. Of course I'm uncomfortable with that. Everyone is. The fact that I was a little fixated on stories of women passing as men and occasionally asking people if I could pass as a boy didn't mean anything. Eventually, I would make queer friends, just online at first. This is when I would learn about non-binary identities. During this time, I would make one gender-fluid OC, mostly as an acknowledgement of my friends' genders. But that character's gender was a fact of who she was, not something I was actively exploring, so I avoided confronting my own notions of gender for a while longer. I definitely did ask my friends about their gender, but I had firmly convinced myself that my gender dysphoria was an allergic reaction to patriarchy, so even when I did relate to them for certain things, I told myself it was a coincidence. Side note, seeing as I was mostly online, you might be expecting me to mention the transmed, true scum, too cute stuff, but you see, I wasn't transgender, so why would I involve myself with transgender discourse? It's not so much that I rode that wave, then I saw it pass from a distance and got to pick up the pieces for myself afterwards. I was taken by transmed ideology at first, but later accepted that gender dysphoria wasn't all you needed to be trans. Because at the time, though I didn't realize it, I definitely felt dysphoria, and it wasn't enough to tell me that I was trans. Eventually, I would also meet a non-binary person in real life during a comic drawing extracurricular. Obviously, I knew that the people on my phone are real people, but you don't always realize you can live a certain way until you see someone else do it right in front of you. After hearing them speak openly about their gender during a class one day, I decided to message them about it. I could really relate to their experience, so I allowed myself to ponder the possibility that I maybe wasn't totally cis. Then quarantine hit. I was spending a lot more time online and in my head. A lot of things happened, but chief among them for this story time was that I really got into Runescape. While I didn't consciously consider Clarity an extension of myself, he certainly was. When he had a feminine body type, I was uncomfortable with it. I hated how the armor showed off his curves. When I acquired a free holiday cosmetic that gave him a bulkier, more masculine appearance, I stuck him in that, even if the aesthetic didn't particularly appeal to me. But it definitely wasn't a reflection of how I felt about my body. Why, I just hate it when women are over-sexualized. Anyway, when I found the makeover mage, I found it cool and funny that you could trans your character's gender for free, so I did it for fun. But he couldn't just be a man, because I wasn't a man, so I decided he was gender fluid. He could switch between genders whenever he pleased, and I told myself I would eventually change him back. Except I never did, nor did I ever refer to him with any pronouns besides he, him. At the time, I identified as non-binary, sliding from she, they to they, them, and while it felt better than before, it still wasn't totally right. I knew for sure I wasn't a girl, but my gender wasn't absent, neutral, or a secret other thing. Realizing this finally led me to sit down and ask myself, what was wrong with masculinity? I would identify the things I had shared in the beginning, then I could reframe what masculinity meant to me. What was a type of man I could identify with? Well, I didn't have to think on it too long because I had been identifying as a man for a while already in Runescape. It is not lost on me how funny it is that the character who helped me understand my gender is called Clarity. Anyway, while realistically I can't literally become him, he is the expression of masculinity I strive for. I like that he's built like an action figure, has long-ish hair, and a stupid little mustache. Since the writing has to accommodate both male and female players, the player character avoids falling into reductive gender stereotypes, and the humorous tone really helped me latch onto Clarity's personality. I'm not going to say Jagex was consciously being super woke with their writing, but it helped things click for me to see my character still be his goofy, heroic self regardless of his appearance. He showed me that being a man didn't have to be scary or a bad thing. This allowed me to come out, seek gender-affirming care, and live as myself more comfortably. For that, Clarity will always have a special place in my heart. If you listened to everyone's stories and made it here, thank you so much for watching. I know not everyone has the ability to pursue their transition goals or to even come out. While I can't meaningfully offer solutions or answers, I hope hearing these experiences uplifts you in some way, because we have always been here and we will continue to be here. Please check out and support the other artists featured in this video. I've linked their channels and socials in the description. You'll also find my socials there. I'd appreciate it if you check those out too. Finally, before I go, I'd like to thank my Ko-fi supporters Noelle and Andromeda. You can also be shouted out at the end of my video and receive other perks as part of my Ko-fi memberships, but only subscribe if you really want to and have the means to do so. Anyway, that's all. Thanks again for watching. Either because I'm in recovery from top surgery or because I've just been generally going through it, I may or may not upload next month. So if I'm not back by then, I'll probably be back in June. See you, take care, and trans rigs.